Welcome, folks. I guess it's got time to remind you that this is Super Tuesday for a number of states. So if you happen to live in that swath of states that runs from Virginia to Texas, you might be sure you vote, because I think these votes are going to be very, very important. Well, he's been one of the outsiders running for president as a Republican. Now he's one of the final candidates left in the race for the White House. I talked yesterday with Dr. Ben Carson about ISIS, Obamacare, illegal immigration, and the importance of Judeo-Christian values in America.
Before sitting down with Pat for his interview, Dr. Carson began by telling the audience what drew him into politics. Charlene Aaron brings us the highlights from his appearance at Regent University.
Absolutely delighted to be back home at Regent University, having spent a number of years on the board here.
A lively crowd greeted Ben Carson at Regent University's Presidential Forum, where he talked about why he entered the political arena.
People ask me all the time, why, after a wonderful career in medicine, would you get into the slimy world of politics? And I ask myself that too. You know, is it really worth all the things you have to go through? You know, the lies and the attacks on you and on your family. And the answer is no. Not if you're doing it for yourself. But if you're doing it for others, the answer is emphatically yes. Because remember, all the people who did things for us. As a youngster, I was a horrible student until my wonderful mother, with her third-grade education and a horrendous life, prayed to God for wisdom. How could she get her sons to understand the importance of education? And you know what? God gave her the wisdom.
Thank you, Ben.
Carson's speech was followed by an interview with Regent University founder and chancellor Pat Robertson.
Have a seat and let's talk a little bit.
Okay.
You have taken on this responsibility, and you've traveled this country, and you've observed the people, and you've talked to people, and you've seen what's happening. Give me your take on this country. What do you think is happening to America?
Well, I think people in America are frightened, and I think they're angry. They're frightened because they recognize that there are global radical Islamic terrorists who want to destroy us. And they don't get the impression that our government recognizes the seriousness of the situation. I mean, all you have to do is go down to the border and see how people are just flowing across the border. I went down there. I mean, there was a fence there, but it was the kind of thing that would have barely slowed me down as a kid. And, you know, the sheriffs down there were telling me about all the people who are coming through who are what they call OTMs, other than Mexicans, coming from Northern Africa and the Middle East, not being screened in any way, setting up their cells here. So, you know, people are concerned about that. And they're angry because they keep sending people to Congress who are supposed to change things, but nothing gets changed. It gets staying exactly the same. Now, the problem, of course, is when people make decisions based on anger and fear, they usually don't make good decisions. So it's very important that we make sure people are properly educated and fully understand what's going on. And I believe that people are actually starting to wake up and starting to think in a very rational way about what's going on.
Well, what would you do with that border thing? And we've had so much discussion about immigrants, about undocumented aliens and so forth, sending them back, leaving them here, having pay. What would you do with those people?
Well, actually, and please go to bencarson.com. You can read all about it, and about multiple policies on everything. But, you know, in Yuma County, Arizona, you know, there are 9 sectors across. And in one of the sectors, which is in Yuma County, Arizona, they placed a layered fence with an asphalt road in between for quick access. They put border guards on the border, and there's a novel idea. And then they also prosecuted first-time offenders. They stopped the illegal traffic by 97%. That's amazing. Now, if we did the same thing across all 9 sectors and included motion detectors and drones for early detection, I think you could get it pretty close to 100. People say, well, they dig underneath. No, because we have radar equipment, which will show whether that's happening. Now, that would stop that part of the migration. The second part is you have to cut off the spigot that supplies the goodies. There can be no goodies. If there are no goodies, people aren't going to be incentivized to come here. So you stop that. And then I think it's, you still have the 11.5 million people here. What are you going to do with them? I would provide them, if they have a clean record, a good record, an opportunity, 6-month window to get registered as guest workers. They have to have a job. They have to pay a back tax penalty. They have to pay taxes going forward. They do not vote. They do not become American citizens. If they want to be American citizens, they have to go through exactly the same thing that any other person would have to go through, because we already have adequate laws to do that.
Carson also discussed the Iran nuclear deal and the declining credibility of the United States.
You know, that was done as an executive privilege. And it wasn't done as a treaty. I think it should have been done as a treaty because it had wide implications. And not only was it a horrible deal, but, you know, what does it say to all of our friends and allies throughout the Arabian Peninsula, most of whom are Sunnis? And, of course, Iran is the capital of the Shiite ideology. So it basically is like we stab them all in the back, and then we come to them and say, you be our boots on the ground, and we'll be the Air Force. Are you kidding me? You know, no wonder there's no enthusiasm for us. And we turn our backs on our friends. We turn our back on Israel. We turn our back on Ukraine. We turn our backs on everybody. And we're destroying the confidence that people used to have in us. So that needs to be restored, I think, urgently, because then we can get people to act in conjunction with us, and it gives us a lot more leverage.
ISIS, ISIL, Islamic State in the Levant, Islamic State in Syria. Why don't you think the president will call those people who they are? He will not use the term Islamic terrorist. He will not use it. They took out of the FBI training manual 1,000 pages dealing with Islamic terrorism. What mindset do you think's going on there?
Well, it's hard to understand his mindset, to be honest with you. You know, last week, as you know, the media was all over me because I said Barack Obama didn't grow up with the typical African-American experience. And I said, you know, he grew up in Hawaii. He had white grandparents who were very affluent, went to a private school, spent his formative years from 10 to 14 in Indonesia with his white mother. I said, do you think that's a typical African-American experience? But, you know, during those formative years, who knows what was going through his head? And then when he came back here, you know, mentor, Frank Marshall Davis, a card-carrying communist. So it's very hard to understand what his motivations are and what he thinks. But I don't think it necessarily would be the same as mine.
Let's go in more detail. The ISIS has risen as an offshoot. He called it the JV team. They have taken over a great swath of territory, and I understand that we actually send out bombers loaded with bombs, and when they get to the target, the environmentalists in the administration say that will be degrading to the environment. Turn around and take your bombs and go back to base. Is that
incredible? Yes, I've heard those rules of engagement. Or also, you know, the other thing is there might be people in there and they might get hurt. You know, give me a break. You know, what I would do instead, I mean, I'm a very humanitarian person. Some people say that I can't be tough because I'm nice. I think David was nice. He was a nice shepherd boy, but but he turned out to be a pretty good warrior, too.
That's right.
And I would simply send out a notice that anything coming out of that refinery is going to be bombed. So if you have people in there that you don't want killed, don't put them on there. And as far as the environment is concerned, you know, we have much bigger environmental issues. I think the thing that really pollutes the environment are radical Islamic extremists who want to kill everybody.
The interview also covered domestic policy and the issue of health care.
The administration jammed down our throat something that's known as Obamacare. It has turned out to be a disaster. What would you do to fix that?
Well, I don't know that it can be fixed, but I would certainly provide something. See, I don't think it's reasonable for the government to come up with something, and then it's so horrible that you have to force people into it. I think you have to have something that's so attractive that everybody wants it. So what I've proposed is, you know, health empowerment accounts, which are just like a health savings account minus the bureaucrats. And you have it from the day you're born until the day you die. We pay for it with the very same dollars that we pay for health care with. You know, we spend almost twice as much per capita on health care as many other nations that have much better access than we do. We have plenty of money to take care of it. We just have to use it the right way.
CBN News chief political correspondent David Brody moderated the forum and fielded questions from the audience.
As president, what would you do to promote a return to virtue in the national mentality that we have today, specifically in the youth of this nation? Very crucial question here.
Well, one of the reasons that we've gotten away from virtue is because of the politically correct environment that says there is no right, there is no wrong, everything is relative. The same thing that happened in the Roman Empire with the great philosophers with the long white beards and the flowing robes. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the values and principles that made us into a great nation. And this is a nation that does have a Judeo-Christian foundation. And a lot of people try to tell you that our founders, they were deists and they didn't believe in God. That's not true. I mean, Benjamin Franklin said, can anything occur without God's notice and intervention? And he rules in the affairs of man. If he can see a sparrow fall and be caring about it, you wouldn't say that if you were a deist. And you know, there are multiple quotes if you look in our book, America the Beautiful, from our founders. I would begin to emphasize those once again. And if I were president, I would work very hard on eliminating the ban on Christianity in our public schools.
What are your specific criteria for a judicial nominee?
I think you have to look at their entire life. And, you know, Matthew 7:20 says, by their fruit you will know them. That's what I mean by the fruit salad. You look at what kind of things have they ruled on, what kind of groups are they associated with, what have they done throughout their lives will tell you a lot more than an interview or several interviews that they've been prepped for. Yes.
You're a dear friend. We wish you the best, and thank you so much for being here for this very informative forum. God bless you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Ben Carson. Well, that was fun. He was on our board for Regent many, many years. He and his wife, Candy, were dear friends, and he got into this thing from being a distinguished head of the pediatric neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital. So,
He's such a man of character.
he is. Common sense.
Yes.
He is very smart.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that wasn't shared in that video that he said was when people say, you know, are you qualified to do this? He talked about what it took to put a team together of surgeons and anesthesiologists and experts who all had big egos, didn't necessarily like each other, but were the best in their field. He's done it.
I first interviewed him. I thought, hey, this guy, you know, he's got this kind of funny little beard and everything. I think there's just no way. But he did something nobody had ever done. He took apart conjoined twins. They were joined at the head, and he was in the operating room for hours, and he did something nobody had ever done in history, and it was a successful where both of these twins lived, and of course he became an international star. But anyhow, he's running for president. He's the last of the ones that we have shown. We have had a tremendous forum, and it has been my privilege to interview each one of them as they came through, and I hope that it has been able to shine a light on who they are, what they believe, and to bring some, some wisdom and understanding to this complex process. Good,
well, it was wonderful, and Regent was a great place to host it. So Regent University also always on top of what's happening.